I always believed love was unshakable if it was real, like the roots of a great oak, deep and enduring. Jenna and I had been together for almost a decade, and while marriage wasn't without its challenges, I thought our bond was stronger than most. She was a force of nature, charismatic, intelligent, and ambitious. I admired her determination in her career as a marketing executive. But now, looking back, I realized that her ambition had begun to cast a shadow over us. The first cracks were subtle. Jenna's travels became more frequent, her late nights more regular. It was always work, she said. Meetings, conferences, new client pitches. I trusted her. Why wouldn't I? Yet, I couldn't shake the unease settling in my chest, like a splinter you can't find but feel with every move. One night, while she was away in New York for yet another trip, I found myself alone with my thoughts. I wandered into our bedroom, inhaling the faint scent of her perfume still lingering in the air. My fingers grazed her side of the bed, and for a moment, I let myself miss her. Then my phone buzzed, a notification from her, a text saying she'd call later. She never did. It wasn't the first time Jenna had been too busy or too tired. I tried to rationalize it. She was dedicated to her job, providing for us both. But the rhythm of her detachment wasn't something I could ignore anymore. Days turned into weeks, and her distance became a storm cloud hanging over us. The way she laughed with her colleagues on video calls, the secretive smile she'd flash while texting. These were not the signs of a woman happy in her marriage. I wanted to ask her about it, confront her, but fear held me back. Fear of the answer, fear of the fallout, fear of knowing my instincts were right. And then, one Tuesday evening, the fragile peace shattered. I answered a call from Jenna's phone, only to hear a man's voice on the other end. "Hello?" I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. The man on the other end hesitated, caught off guard. His voice was casual, yet it carried an intimacy that didn't belong to a stranger. "Is Jenna there?" I froze. Time seemed to pause, the air thick with a tension I couldn't shake. "Who is this?" I demanded, my tone sharp. A beat of silence. Then he chuckled, low and almost mocking. "Must have dialed the wrong number," he said before hanging up abruptly. I stared at the phone, the weight of the interaction pressing down on my chest. My heart raced as I tried to piece it together. His tone, his hesitation. It wasn't just a random call. I knew it. Something about the way he had spoken made my skin crawl, like he knew me, or thought he did. I wanted to tell myself it was nothing, but deep down, I knew better. That laugh, that casual confidence. It wasn't the kind of thing you heard from a stranger. It was the kind of tone a man used when he thought he held power over you, whether he realized it or not. I sat there for what felt like hours, my mind spiraling. Questions swirled, none of them with answers. Who was he? How did he know Jenna? Was he involved with her? My stomach churned at the thought. I needed proof. I couldn't just sit and drown in suspicion. So, I made a decision that felt both desperate and necessary. That night, I went into Jenna's office, searching for something. Anything. Her laptop sat on the desk, the screen locked. I tried the usual, her birthday, our anniversary, but none of the passwords worked. It only deepened my unease. Jenna never used complicated passwords, and the fact that she had now was another crack in the facade. I moved to her nightstand, hesitating before pulling open the drawer. Inside, I found a pile of receipts, restaurants, bars, trips she hadn't mentioned. My hands trembled as I unfolded each one. One stood out, dinner for two at a high-end restaurant in the city, dated just last week, when she was supposed to be working late. That sick feeling in my stomach returned, twisting like a knife. I sat on the edge of the bed, the receipts crumpled in my fist. It wasn't just paranoia anymore. It was real. That's when I heard the faint buzz of her phone. It was lying on the nightstand, just within reach. Without thinking, I picked it up. Her lock screen showed a message. "Miss you already. Can't wait until the next time. Eric." Eric. A name. A man. My heart pounded as I stared at the message, my mind racing. Every fiber of me wanted to open her phone, to dive into the truth no matter how much it hurt. But I couldn't unlock it. The message taunted me, proof of my worst fears. yet just out of reach. I sat there, frozen, until the front door creaked open. Jenna was home. I stood there, the phone still in my hand, the weight of the message crushing me. Jenna's voice called out from the living room, light and cheerful, as though nothing in the world were wrong. "Honey, I'm home," she chimed, the sound of her heels clicking against the floor growing louder. It was such a long day. Work was brutal. I quickly set the phone back on the nightstand and composed myself, forcing a neutral expression. My mind raced. Should I confront her right now? Demand answers? Or should I wait, gather more evidence, and make her unravel her lies in front of me? "Hey," I replied, stepping out of the bedroom just as she rounded the corner. She smiled, the same easy, radiant smile that used to make my heart flutter. Now, it just made my stomach turn. "You look tired," she said, brushing past me to drop her bag on the kitchen counter. "I was thinking we could order in tonight. Maybe Chinese." Her casual tone, her nonchalance, it all felt like a cruel joke. How could she be so at ease while my world was collapsing? I studied her, searching for cracks in the mask she wore. But she was good. Too good. "Sure," I muttered, trying to keep my voice steady. "Chinese sounds fine." The evening passed in a surreal blur. We ate in the living room, the television playing some mindless sitcom neither of us paid attention to. I kept sneaking glances at her, looking for signs, anything that might confirm or deny the truth. But she gave me nothing. When she finally excused herself to shower, I saw my chance. I slipped into the bathroom moments after she stepped under the water. Her phone was on the counter. My heart raced as I grabbed it, but the screen was locked. I cursed under my breath, trying to steady my shaking hands. I remembered something, her work passcode. I had seen her enter it on her laptop once, months ago. It was a long shot, but I tried it. To my astonishment, the phone unlocked. I barely had time to think as I opened her messages. There it was, the thread with Eric. My eyes skimmed through the texts, each one cutting deeper than the last. "Eric, last night was amazing. You looked so beautiful in that dress. I can't stop thinking about it. Jenna, you're sweet. I'll find an excuse to see you again soon. Promise. Eric, I'll hold you to that. The way you kissed me when we left the restaurant. I didn't want the night to end. Jenna, me neither. But you know how it is. He can't know. Not yet." The words blurred as anger and heartbreak coursed through me. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Not yet? What was she waiting for? To leave me? To destroy our life completely? My fingers itched to respond, to confront her through the phone. But the sound of the water stopping in the shower jolted me back to reality. Panicking, I locked the phone and set it back where I'd found it. My pulse thundered in my ears as I darted out of the bathroom and back to the living room, grabbing the TV remote to look natural. Jenna emerged minutes later, her damp hair wrapped in a towel. "I'm exhausted," she said with a yawn. "I think I'm going to head to bed early." I forced a smile. "Good idea. I'll finish this episode and join you." She kissed my cheek lightly, the gesture feeling more like a formality than affection, and disappeared into the bedroom. Once she was out of sight, I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees, and buried my face in my hands. I had my proof now, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like the death of everything we'd built together. And yet, I couldn't stop thinking about one thing. Not yet. What was she planning? Whatever it was, I knew I had to find out. The night stretched on endlessly after Jenna went to bed. I sat alone in the living room, the faint hum of the TV filling the silence. My mind raced, replaying every text, every moment from the past few weeks that now screamed at me with a clarity I couldn't ignore. Jenna wasn't just distant. She was actively weaving lies into the fabric of our life. And Eric wasn't just a fling. He was something more, something dangerous to everything I thought I knew. I wanted to storm into the bedroom, shake her awake, demand answers. But a cooler part of me, a part that had been hardened by the betrayal, told me to wait. Confronting her now would give her the chance to lie, to twist the narrative and put me on the defensive. No, I needed to be smarter than that. I needed to be patient. The next morning, Jenna was as cheerful as ever. She kissed me on the cheek before leaving for work, completely unaware that her perfect little web of deceit was already unraveling. "Don't forget dinner with the Murphys on Friday," she reminded me with a wink. "You know how much they love you." I nodded, masking my emotions with a weak smile. Wouldn't miss it. As soon as the door closed behind her, I sprang into action. I started with her phone, knowing I didn't have long before she'd realize something was off. Using the passcode I'd guessed the night before, I dove deeper into her texts with Eric. The more I read, the more my stomach churned. They weren't just sharing sweet nothings. They had plans, dinners, hotel stays, even a weekend getaway penciled in for next month. My heart sank as I read one particular text. "Jenna, I can't keep pretending much longer. He's going to figure it out. We need to talk about what happens next." What happens next? The words hit me like a sledgehammer. It wasn't just an affair. She was planning her exit strategy, orchestrating the end of our marriage with the same precision she used to land her big marketing deals. I found another string of messages that chilled me to my core. It wasn't just Eric she was talking to. There were other conversations, cryptic, flirtatious texts with unfamiliar names. My hands trembled as I pieced it together. Eric wasn't the only one. Jenna was juggling multiple lives, each more deceitful than the last. I took screenshots of everything and emailed them to myself, careful to delete any trace of what I'd done. The texts were only part of the story. I needed more evidence, more clarity about just how deep her betrayal ran. Next, I combed through our shared bank account. Jenna had always handled most of our finances, so I'd never thought to check before. But now, as I scrolled through the transactions, I saw the pattern emerge. Hotel bookings, high-end restaurants, boutiques, expenses she never mentioned, hidden among the mundane grocery bills and utility payments. It was almost laughable how easily she'd gotten away with it. I had trusted her so completely, so blindly, that I never thought to question her. By the time Jenna returned home that evening, I had a plan. I wouldn't confront her yet, not until I had everything I needed. Instead, I'd let her think she was still in control, still pulling the strings. But I'd be watching, waiting for the moment to strike. That night, as she curled up beside me in bed, I couldn't help but study her. The woman I had once loved so deeply, now a stranger in my own home. Her breathing evened out as she drifted off to sleep, her head resting on the same pillow where I'd once believed we shared dreams of forever. But those dreams were gone now, replaced by the cold, hard reality of betrayal. And as I lay there, staring at the ceiling, I made a silent promise to myself. I wouldn't just let her destroy our life. I'd make her face the truth. And when the time came, she'd regret every single lie. The following days were a delicate balancing act. I forced myself to play the part of the unsuspecting husband, even as every interaction with Jenna felt like a knife twisting deeper into my chest. She was oblivious to the fact that I was unearthing the truth, layer by agonizing layer. I started small, planting seeds to see how she'd react. One evening, while we were having dinner, I casually mentioned a colleague who had gone through a messy divorce after discovering his wife's affair. Jenna's fork paused midair for the briefest moment before she forced a laugh. "People can be so reckless," she said, shaking her head. "I mean, if you're not happy, why not just talk to your partner instead of sneaking around?" The hypocrisy was staggering. I clenched my jaw to keep from snapping at her. Instead, I smiled weakly and nodded. "Yeah, communication is key." Later that night, as she scrolled through her phone, I took note of how quickly she'd switch screens if I walked into the room. The suspicion in her eyes was growing. She wasn't sure if I knew, but something in her gut must have been warning her. I used that to my advantage. The next day, I reached out to a private investigator. It felt like a step too far at first, like I was stepping into a world I didn't belong in. But the investigator, a sharp woman named Claire, was professional and reassuring. She asked for details, Jenna's work schedule, her habits, the evidence I'd already collected. Within hours, Claire was on the case, shadowing Jenna's every move. The results came quicker than I expected. By the end of the week, Claire had photos. Jenna at a hotel with Eric, her hand entwined with his as they disappeared behind closed doors. Another shot showed her laughing over drinks with a different man at a rooftop bar, her body language unmistakably intimate. But the most damning evidence was a video. Jenna and Eric leaving the hotel room together the next morning. She leaned into him, kissing him on the cheek as they parted ways. Watching it felt like being gutted. There it was, in vivid detail, the betrayal I had tried so hard not to believe. That night, I stared at my computer screen, replaying the video over and over until the pain turned to anger. Every smile, every kiss, every lie. It all fueled the fire growing inside me. Jenna's behavior at home grew increasingly erratic. She was distracted, her phone always clutched tightly in her hand. When I asked her about work, she gave vague answers, her usual enthusiasm replaced by curt replies. I could see the cracks in her carefully constructed facade, but she was still holding it together, still convinced she was in control. But I was in control now, and I wasn't going to let her see it coming. Jenna's confidence in her web of lies was as unshakable as it was fragile. She had no idea that every move she made was now under a microscope. I had Claire's reports, the photos, the videos. The evidence was piling up, painting a clear picture of a woman who had not just strayed but abandoned every vow we had made to each other. But I couldn't act yet, not until I had everything I needed. That Friday, we went to dinner with the Murphys as planned. Jenna played her part perfectly, laughing and chatting like the perfect wife. If I hadn't known the truth, I might have believed the act. But the hollow words and fake smiles grated against my every nerve. At one point, Mrs. Murphy turned to me and asked, "So, when are you two going to take a vacation? You're always so busy." Jenna jumped in before I could answer. "Oh, we've talked about it. Maybe next spring. It's hard to find time with our schedules, but I'd love to get away with my hubby." She reached for my hand, and I fought the urge to pull away. Instead, I squeezed her hand lightly and smiled. "Yeah, a trip sounds nice." My voice betrayed nothing of the storm brewing inside me. The evening dragged on, and I caught Jenna stealing glances at her phone, her smile faltering whenever she thought no one was watching. I wondered if Eric was texting her, if he knew she was here, playing the role of my devoted wife while plotting her next rendezvous. Later that night, back at home, Jenna excused herself to the bathroom, leaving her phone charging on the kitchen counter. It was an opportunity one couldn't ignore. Quickly, I grabbed it, typing in her passcode. I scrolled to her texts and wasn't surprised to see a new message from Eric. "Eric, tomorrow can't come soon enough. Counting down the hours." "Jenna, me too. Can't wait to finally have some uninterrupted time with you." Uninterrupted time. I felt the heat rising in my chest. She was planning something big. And then I saw it. A calendar entry marked for the following evening, dinner with Eric. The location was a restaurant just outside the city, one of those places she'd always said we couldn't afford. I couldn't suppress a bitter laugh. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. When Jenna returned, I had already placed her phone back where I'd found it. She kissed me on the cheek and murmured something about being tired, heading off to bed. I watched her go, my mind already formulating the next move. The following evening, Jenna got dressed with an attention to detail she hadn't shown in months. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. She wore a sleek black dress that I hadn't seen before, one that clung to her in all the ways she knew would turn heads. "Big plans?" I asked, keeping my tone casual as I leaned against the doorframe of our bedroom. She hesitated for a fraction of a second before recovering. "Just dinner with some colleagues. Networking, you know how it is." "Of course," I replied, smiling faintly. "Have fun." She smiled back, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Guilt? Doubt? I couldn't tell. As soon as she left, I grabbed my car keys. Claire had given me the restaurant's location earlier that day, and I had no intention of sitting at home while Jenna paraded her betrayal in public. The restaurant was a lavish, dimly lit place, the kind of venue where you could sip a $20 cocktail and pretend life was perfect. I parked a few blocks away and slipped inside, keeping to the shadows. Claire had advised me to stay calm, to simply observe and gather more evidence. But as I spotted Jenna and Eric at a corner table, laughing and leaning into each other, I wasn't sure how long I could follow her advice. They looked like a couple on a honeymoon, her hand on his arm, his fingers brushing against hers. My jaw tightened as I watched them toast with glasses of red wine, their smiles sickeningly genuine. I snapped a few photos from my phone, careful to stay hidden. The satisfaction of having concrete proof was small comfort against the rising tide of anger and betrayal. But I wasn't done yet. I followed them as they left the restaurant, walking hand in hand toward a hotel just a block away. As they disappeared inside, I clenched my fists. I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet, but soon, very soon. The hotel's revolving doors spun like the gears in my mind, churning with a mix of fury and grim resolve. I stood across the street, concealed in the shadows of an alley, watching as Jenna and Eric disappeared into the building. They didn't even try to hide their closeness. His hand on the small of her back, her head tilted toward him as she laughed at something he said. It was like watching a stranger, not the woman I had built my life with. I stayed there for what felt like hours, my phone clenched in my hand. Claire's advice echoed in my mind. Patience, precision, and planning. I needed to make sure that when I confronted Jenna, there would be no escape, no excuses. Still, standing there as the minutes ticked by, the urge to storm inside and drag them both out by their lies burned like fire under my skin. But I didn't. Instead, I called Claire. "They're at the hotel," I said, my voice low. "Did you follow them inside?" "No, but I have photos and the hotel name." "Can you?" "I'm already on it," Claire interrupted. "Let me see what I can pull. Give me an hour." I ended the call, my pulse steadying slightly. Claire was a professional. She'd know how to handle this without emotion clouding the process. I returned home before Jenna did, the house cold and silent in her absence. I sat on the couch, staring at the blank TV screen, my thoughts racing. What was she telling him right now? Did she think of me at all? Or had I already been relegated to the background of her life? The sound of her car pulling into the driveway jolted me out of my thoughts. I didn't move as she came through the door, her heels clicking against the tile. "You're still up?" she asked, her tone light but cautious. "Couldn't sleep," I replied, keeping my face neutral. "How was dinner?" She hesitated, just for a second, before answering. "It was fine. Long. You know how these work dinners go. Lots of small talk and networking." I nodded slowly, my eyes locking onto hers. "You seem happy." Her smile faltered for the briefest moment. "Of course. Why wouldn't I be?" I didn't answer. Instead, I stood and walked past her, heading to bed without another word. The next morning, Claire called with an update. "They booked a room," she said, her voice calm but direct. "One night, paid in cash. I've got surveillance footage of them entering together and not leaving until this morning. I can send it over whenever you're ready." My grip tightened on the phone. "Send everything you have. I want it all." "Understood." When the files came through, I watched them in silence, each clip driving the knife deeper. There was no denying it now. Jenna had betrayed me in every way that mattered, and she had done it with no remorse, no hesitation. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when I found a new message on her phone later that day. "Eric, last night was perfect. I can't wait until we don't have to sneak around anymore." The message was a confirmation of my darkest fear. She wasn't just having an affair. She was planning to leave me, but she didn't know that I had already taken control. That evening, I asked Jenna if she wanted to have dinner together, just the two of us. She hesitated, her phone clutched tightly in her hand, but eventually agreed. "Sure," she said with a soft smile. "It'll be nice to catch up. Things have been so busy lately." She had no idea that I wasn't planning a reconciliation. I was planning her downfall. I planned everything meticulously. The restaurant was an intimate little spot on the edge of town. Quiet, romantic, the kind of place where Jenna and I had once celebrated anniversaries. But tonight, it was all part of my strategy. Jenna arrived looking effortlessly put together, as if she hadn't spent the past months dismantling our life. She wore a navy dress that hugged her figure just right, her hair cascading over her shoulders like nothing had changed. But I could see the cracks, the way her fingers tapped nervously against her phone, the quick glances at the screen whenever she thought I wasn't looking. We ordered wine and made polite small talk. Jenna talked about her hectic week at work, spinning stories that would have sounded convincing if I didn't know the truth. I played along, nodding and asking questions, keeping my tone light. It wasn't until the main course arrived that I decided to strike. You know, I began, swirling the wine in my glass. I've been thinking a lot about us lately. Jenna looked up from her plate, her expression cautious. Oh? In what way? I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. Just about how things have changed between us. How busy you've been. How distant we've become. Her eyes flickered, the faintest shadow of guilt crossing her face. It's just work, she said quickly, forcing a smile. You know how demanding it can be. I don't mean to neglect you. I know, I said, my voice steady. That's why I've been trying to understand. To figure out where we went wrong. Jenna's smile faltered. I don't think we've gone wrong, exactly. Relationships go through phases, right? I nodded slowly, letting her dig herself deeper. They do. But some things can't just be phases, can they? Some things, they break trust. Her fork froze midway to her mouth. What are you saying? I leaned back, crossing my arms. I'm saying that I know about Eric. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Jenna's face drained of color, her lips parting as if to speak, but no words came out. I know about the dinners, the hotel stays, the plans you've been making behind my back. I continued, my voice cold. I know everything, Jenna. Her composure shattered. I can explain, she stammered, setting her fork down with trembling hands. I laughed bitterly. Explain? Sure. Go ahead. Explain how you've been lying to me for months. Explain how you've been sneaking around, smiling to my face while planning your escape with him. It's not like that, she said quickly, her voice pleading. It's complicated. Complicated? I repeated, my anger barely contained. What's complicated about betraying your husband? About destroying everything we've built together? Jenna reached across the table, her eyes wide and desperate. Please, just listen. I didn't mean for it to happen. It started out small, a distraction. I never stopped loving you, I swear. Her words were hollow, an echo of the woman I once knew. I pulled my hand away, letting her see the coldness in my eyes. I don't care about your excuses, I said flatly. I've given you everything, Jenna. My love, my trust, my loyalty. And you threw it all away. Her voice cracked. I made a mistake. I can fix this. We can fix this. I shook my head. No, Jenna, you made a choice. And now, you'll have to live with the consequences. I stood, tossing a few bills on the table to cover the check. Jenna looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. Please, she whispered, don't do this. But I was already walking away, the weight of her betrayal fueling each step. Back home, I prepared for the final stage of my plan. Jenna thought she still had a chance to salvage this, to manipulate her way back into control. But she had no idea what was coming next. That night, I stayed in the guest room, locking the door behind me. I didn't want to see Jenna, hear her voice, or let her spin more lies. While she might have spent the evening crying into her pillow, I spent mine ensuring her betrayal wouldn't go unanswered. The evidence I'd collected, the photos, the videos, the texts, they weren't just for my closure. They were weapons, tools to dismantle the false reality Jenna had constructed around us. I spent hours compiling everything into a neat, damning package. Claire had also sent over background checks on Eric and the other men Jenna had been entertaining. Turns out, Eric had a wife, too. That detail was going to come in handy. By dawn, I had finalized my plan. It wasn't just about confronting Jenna anymore. It was about taking back control. If she thought she could walk away from this unscathed, she was about to learn how wrong she was. The next morning, Jenna approached me in the kitchen, her face pale and drawn. Can we talk? She asked softly. I sipped my coffee, keeping my gaze steady. About what? About us, she said, her voice breaking. I know I hurt you, but I love you, and I want to make this right. I almost laughed at her audacity. Right? You want to make this right? After what you've done? I set the mug down, the anger simmering just below the surface. Do you even hear yourself? She flinched, tears welling in her eyes. I'll end it with Eric. I'll do whatever it takes. Just don't give up on us. Her desperation was almost pathetic. "It's too late, Jenna," I said coldly. "You didn't just make a mistake. You made a choice. Over and over again." She opened her mouth to protest, but I held up a hand. "Save it. I don't want to hear your excuses." I grabbed my keys and left the house, leaving her standing there, broken and silent. It was time to put my plan into action, and my first stop was Eric's house. Claire had already provided me with his address and details about his wife, Sarah. She deserved to know the truth just as much as I did. Sarah answered the door, her expression wary. "Can I help you?" I hesitated for a moment, then handed her an envelope containing photos and text screenshots. "I'm sorry to bring this to you, but your husband and my wife have been having an affair." Her face crumbled as she flipped through the evidence. I had my suspicions, but she looked up at me, tears brimming in her eyes. "Thank you for telling me." We talked for a while, exchanging stories that painted the same ugly picture of betrayal. By the time I left, Sarah had made it clear she wasn't going to let Eric get away with this. Neither was I. The next step was ensuring Jenna couldn't manipulate her way out of this. I met with my lawyer that afternoon, presenting him with the mountain of evidence. "I want this divorce to leave her with nothing," I said firmly. My lawyer nodded, his expression grim. "With everything you've got here, she doesn't stand a chance." We filed the papers that evening, including the evidence as part of the proceedings. Jenna would soon be served, and there would be no denying the truth once it was laid out in front of her. By the end of the week, word of Jenna's affair had spread. Claire had discreetly shared the evidence with a few key people, Jenna's boss, some of our mutual friends, even her parents. The fallout was immediate. Jenna's sparkling reputation, the one she'd worked so hard to build, was in tatters. She came home that evening, her face streaked with tears. "How could you do this to me?" she shouted, her voice cracking. "You're ruining my life." "Ruining your life?" I shot back, incredulous. "You did that all on your own, Jenna. I'm just making sure the world sees who you really are." Her anger melted into despair as she realized there was no escaping the consequences of her actions. The night Jenna was served the divorce papers, she begged me for one last chance. "Please," she sobbed, clutching my arm. "Don't do this. I'll do anything to fix it." I pulled away, my voice calm but firm. "There's nothing left to fix, Jenna. You destroyed us. This is the bed you made, and now you have to lie in it." She collapsed onto the floor, her sobs filling the room. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered the lies, the betrayal, and the pain she'd caused. That sympathy evaporated as quickly as it had come. The divorce was finalized within months, and I walked away with everything. Our home, the car, even custody of the memories we had once shared. Jenna's career took a nosedive after her infidelity became public knowledge, and Eric's wife made sure he faced his own reckoning. It wasn't easy rebuilding my life from the ashes, but each step forward felt like a victory. The betrayal had shattered me, but it hadn't broken me. I emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to never let anyone take me for granted again. As for Jenna, the last I heard, she was struggling to pick up the pieces of her own life. But that wasn't my concern anymore. My story with her was over, and I was ready to write the next chapter. One that didn't include lies, betrayal, or broken trust.